What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode here, the Side Guys Football Forum. I'm one of your co-hosts, Robert Side, joined as always by my good friend, my good buddy, the other half of the Side Guys, Ted the Side. And Ted, the Niners didn't delay it. They got Brock Purdy signed by, before June. They said that they want to get the contract done early. They had these sort of deals with Debo and Brandon Ayuk and Nick Bosa in previous seasons. It stretched into training camp, became a whole mess. But they got Brock Purdy locked up. Not only that, they extended George Kittle, so he's under terms for a long time. Fred Warner is now the highest paid linebacker in the league as well. So they built their sort of core tenant system, especially after they traded Debo Samuel earlier this offseason as well. So it's like they seem to be, building the team around these three guys specifically. So, I know obviously you probably saw the news, but just what did you think about that deal?
Thought it was a slight overpay, but
okay, that's fair.
But it's better than the alternative. And trust me on this one, it's better than being like, oh, is our quarterback that happens to wear number 5 going to work out this year? I don't know. So yeah, I'd pay $200 million to, not have that question lingering in my mind. You did bring up the one aspect I find the most hilarious about this entire thing is, Debo's over there in DC, oh, now we're paying guys, huh? Now we're doing it. Okay, I see how it is. Debo's pissed off watching those headlines.
Well, you look at what he was doing the past season, he was good, but nowhere near that 2021 Debo Samuel that absolutely blew up when it came to fantasy football for the Niners. Everything, he just wasn't that same guy anymore. I don't know whether it's the injuries or whether it's just, changes in the play style or just whatever it was. He wasn't the same guy, which made sense as to why they decided to move on from him. But yeah, I don't doubt that he's a little bit bitter. That's not only did they get traded, he landed in a good situation. Washington's in a good spot. Obviously, they just went to the conference championships. They have a very good, benchmark now to go from there. They have a very premier quarterback in Jaden Daniels. We'll see whether he could replicate there. But just I do agree with you that I don't doubt that he saw these deals being done in San Francisco. Was okay, what happened? Why couldn't I get something similar to that? So
this is an amazing story. We're going off in a bit of a tangent here, but so the former Miami Marlins GM David Sampson convinced Saquon Barkley, or got Saquon Barkley for his nephew's bar mitzvah. Is that what it is when it's a boy?
When it's a boy, it's bar mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah, it's bat mitzvah. Yeah, okay. I always get them confused. But so Saquon was at his nephew's bar mitzvah when the Debo trade happened. So David Sampson went up to Saquon and goes, "Oh, Debo's now in your division." And Saquon was like, "Tell me it was the Cowboys." It's no, it was Washington. Apparently Saquon was like, "Damn it!"
Yeah. I don't doubt it. He could bring a little bit of an added element to that offense opposite of Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz. Hopefully he has a replicate season there. So Tad, we're obviously talking about some of these moves that happened. Brock Purdy's under contract. We got all these things here. So it's, not too early. It's never too early, to talk about fantasy football stuff, Tad, because we're actually talking about this, I think, a couple episodes ago where it's we're already close to the end of May. We're pretty much, it's years moving around pretty quickly.
No, fun fact, I was at the doctor the other day and they were like, yeah, so follow up on June 2nd. And I was like, God, that's a far way off. Got in my car, I checked my phone, and I saw the day. I was like, oh no, that's only a week and a half.
Yeah, it's about 10 days or whatever it is, right? So just crazy just how fast the year has been going here. So yeah, definitely this is a situation where, fantasy football season will be here right around the corner. So I think we definitely want to start thinking about some things as far as some, ways you can start playing your fantasy football strategy, some guys that you maybe want to keep your eye on, those sorts of things. So we got a few topics that we want to discuss in today's episode, maybe some early thoughts as far as how you want to approach the fantasy football draft. We have a few things that we want to cover in today's episode, but obviously as we get closer to draft season in July, maybe early August, we'll go into more deep details as far as some of our strategies. to the players we like, some sleepers, some busts, some, breakout stars, make it or break it type of guys. We'll go into all of that. So yeah, make sure you're following us on our social media handles because that's the best way to keep up to date with everything that's happening with our podcast here. But yeah, we definitely want to get into some early topics here about the draft specifically as you're sort of planning your strategies and things along those lines. We already talked about, Tad, your good friend Jason Davis. He's already done his dynasty rookie draft. So it's like, pretty sure there's people out there that have started to like plan as far as their drafts are concerned, whether it's dynasty, maybe they're already planning their redraft strategy, maybe they do best ball where they want to figure out their roster so they just sort of set it and forget it sort of thing. So yeah, good episode for us to sort of talk about some of those early topics. So Tad, I want to start with, I think, the obvious question here, because I think there's a little bit of a question mark with this year's draft in the case of the number 1 overall pick. Now, I'm seeing a lot of articles and a lot of people on social media saying that Ja'Marr Chase is like the clear-cut number 1 overall pick. Before you get into your
I'm
pick,
going to touch on that.
So exactly. So before you get to your pick, how do you feel about that specifically as Ja'Marr Chase being the number 1 overall pick? Or a lot of people say consensus number 1 overall pick this year.
Well, I can't get into that and without not getting into my pick. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll answer that question. And, knowing how I talk in about 20 minutes.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, shut up. So
you laid it out there.
I think,
took it around with it.
I teed that up with you and just happy Gilmore did. By the way, when does that sequel come out?
June actually. So you don't have to wait too long.
Yeah, I was about to say. I mean,
talking about the year moving along is actually
it's
either June or July, but it's the summer for sure.
Also, I made a Happy Gilmore reference, or I almost made a Happy Gilmore reference to you earlier, but I wasn't sure if you were going to get it.
Why wouldn't I get it? I love that movie.
I don't know. For our viewers and listeners, I was doing notes for tonight's episode, and Cap walked on top of my computer, and I almost texted you the picture of him with a caption, "How am I supposed to get my notes done with that going on, Doug?"
See, that's a reference you made before already. So it's
I know this is my favorite line from the movie.
So I would know that one
Chip with that going on, Doug. Love it. Anyway, back to the original question: who do I think should be the first overall pick? It is a receiver. I know conventional wisdom does usually say you always go running back at first overall. I will also get into that in a bit, but it's not Ja'Marr Chase. It's another J, Justin Jefferson. I think he is double J, unquestionably double J. Being thrown to by Double J. Assuming Aaron Rodgers doesn't join JJ McCarthy.
No, I know, but it doesn't work the same because it's technically JM, right? I'll let it slide though, because technically he is JJ, so yeah.
Shut up with your logic. Anyway, here's why I think that Jefferson is the superior receiver over Ja'Marr Chase is because you look at what he's done since he was drafted in 2020, which, by the way, is crazy because it seems like way far off. He's only been outside of the top 6, with half PPR scoring, which is my go-to, once his entire career. Other than that, since 2020, he has matched it in every season. He's the only receiver to do that. That includes Tyreek Hill, Ja'Marr Chase, for reasons I'm about to get into. So, because here's the reason why I don't particularly like any running backs to go first overall this season is if you had that very, very valuable pick, I'm looking for consistency. I need to know I can count on you week in, week out. So there are 2 quizzes in this section for you.
Okay.
Do you know the last running back to hit back-to-back years as the number 1 overall fantasy running back by the end of the season? Half PPR.
My guess would be Adrian Peterson. Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Ryan, we need those Jim Cramer buttons. This is where it comes in handy.
Maybe instead of him, I'd say no. Jamal Charles had that one really good year. But I don't know if I'd give him 2. Yeah, I
will tell you, you're actually going too far back.
I'm going too far back. Okay. All right. So a little bit more recent. Le'Veon Bell?
Nope.
Derrick Henry?
Nope. See, that was funny because before I did the research, if you had asked me, he would have been my guess as well. It was Todd Gurley.
Wow.
Finished first in 2016 and then again in 2017. Since then, no running back has repeated as number one. Now, there are some cases where they stay in the top 5, but in most cases, they actually drop the number one from the previous year drops to like out of the top 5. So that running back consistency is not there for what I want as number one overall pick. Justin Jefferson, again, with that consistency of he only had one season he missed the top 6. And that's because Josh Dobbs like had a vendetta against him and sent him to the hospital. And so he missed half a season. If that had not happened, he probably would have been a top 5 receiver for his entire career. That is consistency. That is extraordinary. And it's extraordinary. It's extra extraordinary because I was going for the extra joke there. Shut up.
I know that was a little too much for me.
Oh, fuck you. But it's because he is consistent despite his quarterbacks. He has had a plethora of quarterbacks in his career. In fact, he's had 6 quarterbacks throwing to him in his career. Can you name all 6 of those quarterbacks?
For Justin Jefferson?
For Justin Jefferson.
Okay. Kirk Cousins is 1.
Yep. I just gave you the other one.
Josh Dobbs is the other one.
Dobbs is 2.
Daniel Jones? Did he throw a pass for him? No? Okay. Then okay. I was thinking about that one. I was like, possibly. Nick Mullins.
Oh, nice. Yep.
Former Niner Nick Mullins.
That's 3. You're missing a very obvious one.
Very obvious one. Jeez. Sam Darnold.
Yeah, there it is.
Was that the obvious one? Okay.
Yes, it was.
If
you get these next 2, I will be so impressed.
Justin Jefferson, who threw to him? I know Teddy Bridgewater flirted with the Vikings briefly. No, that was not him. Okay.
They're both white.
Thank you. Okay.
Shortens the list, does it?
Jeez. Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, one's a Mormon.
It's a Mormon. Jeez, I have no idea.
I'll give you 5 more seconds.
Sean Mannion?
Oh, there we go.
See, I thought so. I was like, I remember him being part of the Vikings. I just couldn't remember whether he was there with Justin Jefferson specifically. So, okay. I have no idea on the 6th one. You can tell me that one.
Jaron Hall.
I never would have guessed Jaron Hall, actually. I never would have guessed that one.
So to recap,
is he the one you thought was a Mormon because he went to BYU?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's not racist, is it? That's fine. That's an okay joke to make. So yes, to recap.
Isn't Jaron Hall black?
Oh my God, is he?
I mean, I'm not saying that just because he's black, he can't be Mormon, but I was just like, I don't know, like, that's just my point. So just like, I thought he was, he's.
All right. No, I'm cutting this off. I'm cutting this.
Okay,
we're fine. Just look that up for me while I'm talking. But to recap for listeners.
Wait, what am I looking up? Whether Jaron Hall's Mormon or whether he's black or both?
Yeah, yes, both.
Oh, everything under the sun with Jaron Hall. Okay, let's see if I can find that information.
While he's doing that, let me recap for our listeners and viewers. The 6 quarterbacks that Justin Jefferson has had is Kirk Cousins, Sean Mannion,
the seat that care about Jaron Hall. I don't think they care about your stats anymore.
Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, and Sam Darnold. And again, despite that, carousel quarterbacks, he's finished in the top 6 in every year of his career, except for when he had injury concerns for really the first time in his career. Now, you brought up Jamar Chase. Do you want to guess his stat? How many touchdowns has Jamar Chase had without Joe Burrow at quarterback? And I'll even, I'll throw you a bone on this one. He has played 7 games without Joe Burrow as his quarterback.
I remember when
this took a long ass time to figure out.
Really? Okay, interesting. I think it's when Brandon Allen became the quarterback, right? Or
no,
Jake Brown.
Yeah, it was Jake Brown. Yep.
I don't remember him throwing to Jamar Chase all that often, actually. I think T. Higgins actually got more of the love. Same thing with Andre Yoshibas as well. So I'm going to say maybe 1.
You nailed it.
Nice,
so in the 7 games without Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase has 409 yards and 1 touchdown. Not great.
Not great. Yeah.
So that's the gamble you're taking with Jamar. Do I like Jamar Chase as a receiver more than Justin Jefferson? Maybe. Honestly, I consider them pretty equal in terms of skill level, but that doesn't matter. The difference is what gives Justin Jefferson the nod is that he has shown me time and time again, it does not matter who's throwing to him, he will produce. Jamar Chase, on the other hand, if Joe Burrow goes down, and that Bengals offensive line is going to suck until the day we die, if Joe Burrow goes down, Jamar Chase struggles to produce. So that's why Justin Jefferson gets the nod for me. Is Jaren Hall white?
No, he was black.
Damn it!
He is black.
I mean,
he
no,
is
not
a Mormon as well.
He's a
Mormon as well.
Good for him. All right, 1 for 2. I'll take it.
He's a Mormon as well. Because he served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Roseville, California. So he's actually from California.
Oh, wow. He got one of those cozy missions, huh? It's like Book of Mormon when he wants to go to Disney World.
But okay. Yeah, I could see Justin Jefferson sort of being that number 1 overall pick or being in the conversation there. I think just for me, with the switch to JJ McCarthy is just too much of an unknown for me. It's like, I know you've obviously laid out the stats that Justin Jefferson can produce with any quarterback with that sort of trivia that we have with the 6 quarterbacks that he's played with and still been able to produce such amazing numbers. I don't know. For some reason, I'm still a little hesitant to put him at number 1 overall. And this is actually a question that we ended up eliminating from the podcast. We were actually discussing what are the best depth positions and maybe what was the worst depth positions when it comes to fantasy football. And we both agreed that wide receivers probably has the most depth.
Yes.
And so that's why I sort of go back to that whole adage where it's like I said, maybe that's just my old school mentality too. It's like, I prefer to stack running backs early. And so that's why for me to see a wide receiver go first, I know it's a pass first league. I know Justin Jefferson is produced there, but for me, because of the potential positional scarcity, that was a bit of a mouthful there.
That was impressive. I would have done so much worse on that.
Because of that, I maybe trend towards maybe taking a running back first overall, maybe even though it's not a clear cut. Yes, this is a guy that needs to go number 1 overall over a wide receiver sort of thing. So that's just my boat. But yeah, I do like your pick here. I also want to emphasize the pick as I transition into my pick here, just to sort of reemphasize that I don't like Jamar Chase's number 1 overall pick either. Because I mean, if you look at the fact, you look at his numbers, he had an amazing season overall. Like, I mean, there's no doubt about that. He finished as the number 1. If I remember correctly, I think he finished as the first overall when it comes to all fantasy players last season, not only at the wide receiver position. So, I mean, he had that great of a season, but it was also tied to the fact that the Bengals started the season slow and then they finished red hot. And that's why he's able to sort of inflate those numbers towards the second half of the season. Because, Dad, if you look at his first half stats, this is the games 1 through 9. He had 70 targets, 55 receptions, 717 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. In 3 of his first 9 games, he had at least 11 targets. Only 3 of them. You get to the second half. So this is games 10 through 18, weeks 10 through 18. He had 105 targets, 72 receptions, almost 1,000 yards, 991 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. 6 of those final 8 games, Tad, he had at least 11 targets. So, I mean, this guy was absolutely on fire the second half of the season, which led to him being such a great fantasy player because he finished so strong.
So I just looked it up while you were talking. He actually finished, he was the 6th best player in fantasy football.
Best,
okay. But the 5 above him, all quarterbacks. It was all the top 5 quarterbacks. So the quarterbacks that finished ahead of him was Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield. That's surprising. Jaden Daniels. And then number 6 was Jamar Chase.
So first among all
quarterbacks. Baker had himself a season.
You did play really well.
Really well. Love it. I love that dude.
So, I mean, because of that, it's like, I can understand why a lot of people see him as a number 1 overall pick. But yeah, for me, it's just like, because Cincinnati got so hot at the second half of the season, that's why it inflated his numbers to make him look so much better. But yeah, overall, it's like, you look at the entire season, the consistency's there where it's like, you know, they struggled so much to begin the season. Who's not to say that Cincinnati will struggle again to start the season next year? It's like, if I want my number 1 overall pick, I need him to hit the ground running. And so that's what worries me the most about Jamar Chase. So, like I talked about, I like running back going number one overall. So that's why I'm going with the running back position here. I don't know whether you want to guess as far as who I'm picking here.
You're going to say Saquon, right?
I'm not going to say Saquon.
Oh, damn it. I had a good Saquon counter, like in preparation. Fuck. I feel like Joe Biden at the presidential debate. Like I'm screwed.
I'm going with the Dirty Bird, Bijan Robinson, as my number one overall pick this year. Now, the reason that I like Bijan Robinson over Saquon Barkley this year is the first one is Saquon Barkley is doomed to have a regression. I mean, he had the most amazing season.
That was my big counter. That was my big counter. Also, don't forget the season before this, he was very injury prone.
Exactly.
And Philadelphia cannot keep using him in that
at the level that they did. Yeah, there's no way
they're literally going to run him into the ground.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's no doubt he had an amazing season. He was so close to setting the single season rushing yard record. But yeah, he's definitely going to see a decline this year. He's still going to have a productive season. But once again, when I'm drafting a guy number one overall, I need him to replicate what he did last year. And I don't think he will.
As I pointed out.
Whereas where I'm going with Bijan Robinson here, I think you'll look at the offense with the changeover from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix Jr. I don't know what we're going to get. We saw a very small sample size with Michael Penix Jr. with the final 3 games of the season. I think he played in 5 games overall, but he started the final 3 games of the season. He looked good, and I think obviously you give him the full offseason as a starter, playing with the skill weapons that they have there with Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, obviously Bijan Robinson here. I think he could be productive in that offense, but still, very similar to what I was talking about with JJ McCarthy, still a little bit of an unknown. We saw it, but can we really trust it for sure over the course of a full season from game 1? So with that change there, I think they may lean more on the running game. You have to look at what Bijan Robinson did last year. He finished 3rd among running backs in PPR leagues. He finished 9th overall at the position we talked about. Jamar Chase being the 6th overall non-quarterback to sort of finish in fantasy football. Bijan Robinson finished 9th overall among all players there. So yeah, had a fantastic season. One of 4 running backs with 300 fantasy points or more last season, as well as one of only 3 running backs with at least 20 fantasy points per game last season as well. Like we talked about, when you want that consistency from the get-go, you get that with Bijan Robinson. So that's why I like him here as my number 1 overall pick. Plus, Ted, the cherry on top of the sundae, he plays in the NFC South. NFC South has absolutely terrible defenses in that division. He's going to play against Carolina twice. He's going to play against New Orleans twice. He's going to play against Tampa Bay twice. So I think you get that benefit of 6 games out of the season where he's going to have beneficial matchups to be able to produce very big numbers there. So that's why for me, Bijan Robinson, I think he's my number 1 overall pick this year.
I will say this. I like this fact because as you laid out, you know, he did really well last year in terms of fantasy. And I mean, that was one of my predictions that really just bit me in the ass because I was like, he's going to be a bust. Him and Kyle Pitts suck. And then, yeah, Bijan Robinson absolutely butchered me.
We'll get to Kyle Pitts in another episode, but Bijan Robinson won. That's, you're
but it's the it's the fact that he has continuity. I think for the first time in his NFL career was Zach Robinson coming back as offensive coordinator. So that continuity of offense, I think, is massive. Not just for Zach Robinson, for Zach Robinson, not just for Bijan Robinson. I'm mixing up my Robinsons. But I also like the fact that could be a massive payoff for Michael Penix Jr. as well, because you are correct. So he played in 5 games last year. He threw for 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Okay. I mean, I'm not like yelling like, oh, that's awful. But like, and plus it's one of those things like if you actually watched him in the context of the games, he actually was playing much better. He definitely outplayed Kirk Cousins. So that continuity of offense is also huge with young quarterbacks. They don't have to really, they're not going to Alex Smith him. And I'm sorry as a Niners fan, but that's just got to be a verb for the rest of our lives. But that continuity of offense, I think, is going to be huge. So I think that's a risk, but it's a calculated risk. I think I could see the payoff there. Now, I think that's a better risk to take if you're picking 3rd, 4th, or 5th. But, if someone did that in my draft, I might actually do that if I get the 1st overall pick because I'm in an auction draft. So even if I don't get Bijan Robinson, I'm going to drive the price up on him so high that, I really hate that my friends listen to this. I just gave away my strategy. But okay, no, I don't totally hate that, but I will say that it is a risk.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. It's totally a risk for sure. But like I said, I think that's a risk I'm willing to take more than, like I said, seeing Saquon Barkley with that possible regression factor. That's the thing that sort of scares me off a little bit more. So yeah, I'm going with the next guy in Bijan Robinson because, like I said, I'm sticking to running backs. I can totally understand why some people will go wide receiver here. But yeah, for me, I'd rather go running back with number 1 overall.
Hold on. Is that coming through on your end?
What's going on?
You don't hear that?
No.
Okay, well, that's because you're on the West Coast. I'm literally hearing from Chicago a bunch of Philadelphia fans screaming at us and climbing up lampposts. So neither one of us is taking Saquon number 1 overall. That is a hot take.
It is a little bit. Also, Tad, I mean, believe it if you want to, but he is on the cover of Madden 26. So,
is that already been announced? Oh, it's the
Madden curve.
Let me guess. It's the stupid back hurdle thing, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Of course it is. God damn it, Madden. So predictable.
And I don't know if you remember, Tad, but who was on the cover before in the last game? Do you remember?
Was it McCaffrey?
It was Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
So,
hey,
that's
interesting. Notice how we did not bring up McCaffrey at all, and he was the unquestionable number 1 overall pick.
He was. And like I said, I think we're going to have to save it for another episode, but he is the biggest enigma for me this year. I really just don't know how to proceed.
It would not shock me if he fell out of the first round.
He is like the epitome, and then we'll transition to the next topic after that, but he is the epitome of a boomer bust player for me this year, because if he hits, he is absolutely going to replicate possibly that season that he had 2 years ago. But if he suffers from what he was suffering from last year, yeah, he's going to be an absolute,
his fantasy career is done. It's going to be almost Peyton Hillis like.
Yeah, very accurate. Very
also
accurate.
Speaking Madden curses,
it hit him pretty hard too. Yeah, so. Yeah, like I said, that's a discussion for a later episode. But yeah, he is probably my biggest boomer bust player this year for sure. Christian McCaffrey, that is.
I think I would agree with that.
All right. Well, let's get on to some other topics here, Ted, that we wanted to talk about. You had a little bit of questions about the labeling of this particular segment, but I wanted to compare it to, obviously these are guys that you want to get after round 5. So this is probably, somewhere in that 6 to 10 round range is where you want to grab some of these guys. I like to call them obviously mid-round magicians. This is usually a term that's labeled in the NBA sense, where you talk about guys that are very good in the middle of the court there. You got your DeMar DeRozans, your Jimmy Butler. It's a mid-round magician.
How dare you, sir?
Tyrese Halliburton is definitely one of these guys as well.
How
so it's
dare
there's guys
you,
that,
sir?
Are not playing into the analytics where they have to shoot a bunch of threes. They're not your James Hardens. You're not your Stephen Currys. They like to sort of play in the middle of the court as opposed to playing on the outside. So you got these guys here. So I think you equate that here to fantasy football, where it's you definitely have a certain idea as far as who you want with your first 5 picks. And once you get to 6 to 10, this is where you want to take some chances, maybe some guys with some high upside. This is where you take some rookies or whatever. But depending on the guy that you draft, they could eventually become starters for your roster. And you could possibly either use them in trade bait or trade some of the other guys and put these guys into your starting roster, Tad. So what's a guy that you think fits that bill of description here as far as a mid-round magician when it comes to fantasy football drafts?
I don't know why I found this so funny, but man, you just threw a massive stray at James Harden.
Why?
He's coming off a career year, man.
It doesn't matter. The guy still chucks up so many threes.
Jesus, what did James Harden do to you?
I will say, the second half of James Harden's career, he is more facilitating the ball, so he is more of a passer. But he still lives or dies by threes. This guy is still not a mini guy. The guy can't make a 2-point shot to save his life unless he's driving to the layup and trying to get a free foul attempt or whatever.
I will say this. A lot of people are bitching about Shea Gilgeous-Alexander of all he does is drive to the line and get a foul. I'm like, that's what
foul merchant.
Yeah, I was like, that's what Harden's been doing for the last decade.
That's why he finally won an MVP, and so did SGA finally as well.
Exactly. I could not believe that, by the way. He is not better than Jokic. Get out of here. Anyway,
I think it's one of those situations, Tad, where it's very similar to the NFL, where it's Brady had such amazing season, so he's always.
It's just you can't. It's like the Jordan. I heard it referred to as the Jordan rule, where it's yes, we all know Michael Jordan's the best, or we all know LeBron James the best, but let's spread the love a bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's after a while, it's can he surpass what he did last year? In this case, Jokic definitely did, but I think after a while, it's just okay, is the NBA really going to give this guy 3 straight MVP awards? I don't know if they're going to do that, right? Actually, they already gave him 3 straight, right? I think this would be a 4th straight.
I believe he only had 2, but it doesn't matter because Jokic could care less.
No, exactly.
He just wants to tend to his sheep. Yes, he just wants to tend to his sheep and his goats.
His horses, not his sheep. His horses.
Oh, whatever. Wants to go back to the farm upstate. Anywho, so this is actually a guy whose stock like skyrocketed for me in the last couple of days because I don't know exactly when this news broke, but I learned it over the weekend. And for those of you wondering, we are recording on a Wednesday night. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is a massive sleeper or mid-round magician this year. And that is because, and this was too funny because I remember texting you on day 3 of the draft when the Panthers selected Trevor Etienne. I was like, what is with them taking running back every single year? Because they just took Jonathan Brooks last year. Well, it turns out that Jonathan Brooks's ACL injury he suffered late last season is a lot worse than we thought. And what makes it even worse than worse, it's the same ACL he injured at Texas, which is why he fell out of the first round in last year's draft. So it has officially been announced he will not play this season.
Yeah.
So that
2025.
Exactly. And that explains so much about why they took Trevor Etienne because, they're like, shit, we need to get it back up now. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. I'm not that worried about Travis Etienne. Now, if Travis Etienne was on the Panthers, then I'd be a little nervous. Trevor Etienne, they're brothers. Leave me alone. Trevor Etienne, while good, and I think he will actually end up, it's not fair they both start with T at the end, too. That's just like, you're just asking me to mix them up. Here's the thing, is Chuba Hubbard's best part of the season last year came in his last 8 games. In 5 of those games, he scored 14 plus points. Do you know who also was playing in 8 of those games? Jonathan Brooks. He was activated in the mid-season point for the Panthers. So actually, Chuba, because if you look at the first half of his season, he was good, not great. And then actually, weirdly enough, when Jonathan Brooks was activated, Chuba Hubbard, he exploded. And actually, his final game of the season he played in, because he did not play in week 18, in week 17, he had 30 points in half PPR leagues. So clearly when he has, a backup that can take some of the pressure off him, he actually does better. And I think people are still kind of wary of that Carolina tag. And I think there's a lot of value in the Carolina offense. I think Bryce Young is an interesting sleeper at quarterback. I think Adam Thielen is a very solid bench option. Ted McMillan is one of my favorite fantasy rookies going into the season. And I think Chuba Hubbard could possibly reach the top tier of running back 2. I'm not saying you're going to get like a running back 1 in the mid rounds, but I think he's a guy that a lot of people are going to sleep on. And I so appreciate that you said this. If he blows up, if he has like, I should have looked at the Panthers schedule, but if the Panthers have an easy streak going and he's blowing up and you're still like, I think he's going to go cold. He's going to be an absolute gold mine. Bless you. He is going to be an absolute, oh my God, 3 in a row. Bless you. Goodness gracious. Dust your place, man. 4 in a row. I've never seen that in my life. Thank you for muting your mic. Oh, 5. We hit the 5er, people.
It's actually like 6. Yeah, it's been getting crazy as far as allergies here. That's the biggest thing here. So.
It's called Zyrtec, man.
Yeah, definitely need to pick some up.
I think if Chuba Hubbard is on a hot streak and you're still a little wary, he's going to be a prime, like people will be dying for him, especially because at that point in the season, there are going to be injuries. People are going to be needy for running back. So either way, I don't see how drafting Chuba Hubbard will hurt you in any way.
I think the big thing too, as to why Chuba Hubbard could find success too, is that you have to remember they moved on from Miles Sanders. He's now a member of the Dallas Cowboys. So like you mentioned, it's like without that backup there, we'll have to wait and see exactly what's going to happen with Trevor Etienne as far as whether he's going to be a big production.
I will say this,
piece of this backfield or not. So
to interrupt you real quick, if I'm not mistaken, Etienne didn't break either of our top 10 in running back rankings when it came to the draft.
Yeah, no, he did not. So I mean,
he's good, but he's just like, I never see him like being like, ooh, he could contend for a starting spot. He's just like not that type of back. He is the definition of a complimentary back. Actually, it's ironic that you mentioned Miles Sanders because I think that's like his ceiling. It's like a Miles Sanders type role.
Yeah, so I think there's some production value there, but I think it's going to take some time with Trevor Etienne. So I think that's a big thing. So it gives a big runway for Chuba Hubbard when he starts the season as the lead back there, because I bet you now with the injury to Jonathan Brooks and the way that he sort of injured himself his rookie year as well, I wonder if Carolina is sort of regretting that draft position move, because you have to remember, Ted, they traded up to get him too. They traded up to get him in the second round. There's a lot of talk that possibly he was going to land with the Dallas Cowboys there in the middle of the second round. I remember we talked about that as far as like our draft winners and losers, that the Cowboys didn't make that type of move that Carolina did. So that's obviously the past now. But it's like, I bet you that maybe looking at next year, they're probably going to look at a more stable lead running back. Maybe they'll look at trades, maybe free agency, whatever it is. But yeah, for now, I think Jonathan Brooks is kind of a very much of an afterthought, that backfield now. I think it's Chuba Hubbard's backfield for now. We'll see what happens with Trevor Etienne. But because of that, I 100% agree with you. It's like in the middle rounds there, a lot of people are going to be scared off by the fact that he plays in Carolina. What can we expect from Carolina? Yeah, Bryce Young started to look good towards the end of the season. Will that sort of continue into this year? That is the big thing we want to watch to see whether it's like they sort of have the continuity on offense. Lots of new pieces there, lots of young pieces there as well, too. So it's like, how will that all gel together as a unit on offense there? But yeah, Chuba Hubbard being that sort of veteran of the group, and I think he's only like, what, 26? 27 or something like that. So it's like
he's not hit the nightmarish age of 30. Says that.
Yeah, if he's the old guy of the group and he's still in his mid-20s, then it's like, yeah, that's sort of, good side for the offense. That's like they're got a lot of young pieces there. But
last thing to bring up with this whole Panthers situation, because I know people are gonna be yelling at us like, you've never even mentioned this guy. Rico Dowdle did sign, so like the Cowboys and Panthers essentially did a trade. I mean, I know Rico did pretty well last season, but again, I think the familiarity with this offense, and if you watch the Panthers, and I don't blame you if you didn't last season, Chuba Hubbard just seems like such a perfect fit. It's kind of like James Conner with the Steelers, where it's like, I know you're actually not this good, but like just the way your play style fits in this offense, like it's the perfect match made in heaven. Because I know James Conner's doing well in Arizona, but not quite the same as he was in Pittsburgh. And I think that's kind of what's going on with Chuba Hubbard right now. So I think that Chuba Hubbard is well worth taking in the 5th round on. I think he'll be there in most drafts.
He easily will. So yeah, I think that's a perfect candidate here for sure. Ted, I got to give you a receiver for my mid-round magician here. And this is a guy that's been a solid producer for many years. Fortunately, dealt with a very severe ACL injury last year in week 8 with the Houston Texans. And that is the guy that I'm talking about here, because he signed only a 1-year deal with Houston. He is now a member of the New England Patriots, and that is wide receiver Stefon Diggs. I think there's a very good chance that because of that injury there, with him playing in New England, very similar to Carolina, where it's just like, I don't know what to expect from that offense, because, I mean, there's not a lot to expect from that offense last year. So it's like this, what's going to carry over to get there? We got a new head coach, obviously, there with Mike Vrabel. We're going to dive into it later this year with our head coaching series. Hopefully in a couple weeks there, we'll get that started for you guys. But yeah, I think just that's the big thing where it's just like, I don't know what we can expect from this offense here. But I think with Stefon Diggs, I think that's a guy that we can trust, Tab, because before the ACL injury in 2024, he had 6 straight seasons of 1,000-yard receiving marks. He also had 5 of those 6 seasons where he finished as a top 10 wide receiver in PPR leagues. So, I mean, the big reason why he found a lot of success, Tad, was because he was the primary option in all those offenses, both during his time in Minnesota. Yes, Adam Thielen sort of came on a little bit during his time there, but then he was traded to Buffalo. Here's the clear-cut number 1 option there in Buffalo for the time that he was there. When he got to Houston,
he could catch a long pass.
Then obviously he got traded to Houston. He suffered the injury, as I mentioned, in week 8. But even that there's a lot of target share to go around there, where it's like it was him, it was Nico Collins, it was Tank Dell. So it's like we weren't sure what we were going to get from him in Houston. As mentioned, suffered the injury, so they decided to move on. They decided to, draft the entire Iowa State Cyclone wide receiver depth chart to add to their roster this year. So it's like they got that going for them. But here, I think in New England, it's not much of a depth chart there at the wide receiver position. So it's like, he's going to become the de facto number 1 option in that passing offense. He'll be a go-to target for Drake May in that passing offense. So I think you look at the fact that's like, he is coming out the ACL injury. So it's like whether he can come back, still be the same guy. He's going to be 32 when the season is the midway point. He's going to turn 32 in November. So it's like, can he come back from that at that, old age of 32. If you can't see me on the audio version, I'm doing air quotes with the old age of 32. So you wonder about that. Can he still make the sharp cuts as he can be the sharp route runner that he once it was? I think he can be. I think it happened in week 8, so he's got a good enough recovery time to come back, start the season, and be a good member of that offense. But I think very similar to what we talked about, I think it was a couple episodes ago, it might have been the last episode, I can't remember, where we talked about DK Metcalf being with a member of Steelers, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Where he got traded there. I was like, okay, that didn't really move the needle, but then they traded George Pickens. He's the de facto number one now. It's like, I love that fantasy stock just skyrocketed.
It was the same thing with the Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks thing of like, someone goes down or someone gets straight away. All of a sudden you're like, ooh, okay.
So I think that's the same thing here with New England, where it's like, yeah, Stefon Diggs becomes the number one option by default because I just don't like many of their other receiving options. They didn't strike me as number one options, hence why their passing offense didn't find a lot of success last year. So you bring in Diggs, who was a former number one option with so many other offenses. Now he's that number one option here in New England. Everybody else can sort of fill the gaps there as being the supplementary pieces. And now this passing offense may find a little bit more success now because they sort of found their established roles. As far as Diggs the go-to guy, now we'll supplement it with Hunter Henry and Demario Douglas and Kendrick Bourne and those types of guys. Keyshawn Boutte as well. So it's like, they got some of those pieces there. But yeah, I really like him to come as far as like being a mid-round steal because everybody's going to look at the fact, like I said, of him being in New England now, of him coming off that injury. So it's like, I think that's going to play to a lot of fantasy managers' wheelhouse as far as like, okay, I got a potential starting flex option, or depending on the roster settings, a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on my starting roster in the middle rounds. I don't have to worry about investing a high-level pick for a guy that once was a high-level pick. This guy was, potentially in previous years a first-round or second-round pick in a lot of drafts. But now I could get that type of production in the 6th or later round. I think that's a steal, and I think a lot of fantasy managers will be very happy if they can sort of come away with him in those middle rounds.
So a couple of things on that. First off, just want to go back to a take I had 2 years ago where people were calling me crazy because they're like, Drake May is almost as good as Caleb Williams. Are you insane? And now we're like, you know what? They're kind of in the same tier right now. I'm like, okay, that looks promising, but we'll see. So just had to pat myself on the back for that one.
You're right.
But
you're right.
No, I completely agree with you. And I literally told good friend of the show, Jason Davis, that because he was thinking, and I believe he actually ended up drafting Kyle Williams, their 3rd round pick at Washington State.
Oh, yeah.
And I told him, he was like, oh, what do you think about that pick? It's like, I don't hate it, but I don't love it because that everything behind Stefon Diggs is a shit show. I don't know who's going to emerge from that. It's going to, that preseason.
I wouldn't say it's a shit show. I think it's just a lot of questions.
Shit show makes it sound bad, but yeah, you're just it's just every man for himself. That preseason is going to be fascinating to watch. I almost hope the Patriots get Hard Knocks because that's going to be the battle that I'm going to follow for those 4 or 5 weeks. On top of that, my only worry about your pick, I think Stefon Diggs is still such a big name that he's not going to be there in the mid rounds. I think people still will recognize. I think so. I think he's going to be a prime end of the 2nd, definitely in the 3rd. I would be absolutely shocked if once the ADP numbers start coming out, if he falls beyond the 3rd round. If that is the case, I am 100% on the boat with you. That is an easy. That is a 5th round pick where I'm like, my friends are making fun of me because I'm jumping up and down. I got this guy. And they're like, you bid $2 for him. And it's so yes, no, I completely agree because I'm not too scared. The ACL is no longer the oh shit type of injury was in the 2000s and 90s.
That's true.
It doesn't really scare me that much unless you're like Jonathan Brooks where it just keeps happening. If it happens twice, then I start getting a little worried. But this is Stefon Diggs, if I'm not mistaken, his first really big injury of his career. I think he'll be fine.
He's been healthy all up until this big injury. So yeah, hopefully that should work in his favor too.
Loved what the Patriots did. They invested clearly most of their draft capital into the offense. Taking Will Campbell was one of the best decisions made in the entire draft the other month. So I think that Drake May is going to really step up. I think Drake May is another quarterback that would be very interesting late flyer to take a pick on. So yeah, I completely agree with you. But the only thing I disagree with you is I don't think he's going to be there in the mid rounds.
That's fair. That's fair. I think also, like I said, depends on the leagues that you're playing in. If you're playing in like a,
That's
you know,
fair.
10-person league, he may go a lot later. If you're playing in a 12-person league, you may go a lot sooner. Obviously it depends on roster settings. So all those things
I
play
was
a
just
factor.
about to say that if like you have one of those, if you play in one of those 2 quarterback leagues, he probably will be there in the mid round because that run on quarterbacks. But if you play in quote unquote a traditional league with a flex spot, yeah, it's hard for me to imagine he falls past the 3rd.
Fair. We'll see exactly what sort of happens there. But just, yeah, I think, like I said, you see the injury, you see him going to New England. You don't know how that offense is going to look, especially with the new look head coach there. I think that's the big thing that makes me sort of wonder whether he'll be going before those first 5 rounds or whatever, or whether he'll go after. So I'm leaning towards that after part. But yeah, you never know.
I will say this. So, like I said, with the Justin Jefferson thing, it was like he's the only receiver since 2020 to land in the top 10, and 4 out of 5 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The closest behind him was Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs was 3 out of the 5 years. So there you go.
Consistent.
Also, do you want to guess in the last decade? So since 2015, who has the most receiving yards in the NFL?
Since 2015?
Since 2015.
Is it Justin Jefferson?
It's Wes Welker.
Wes Welker.
No, I'm kidding. I don't even think he played in 2015. It was actually Mike Evans.
Mike Evans. That makes sense.
It makes sense when you see it, but like, yeah, you would never guess Mike Evans.
The streak of 1,000-yard seasons, right? So.
Yeah, well, you think of him more as a touchdown guy, not a yards guy. But yeah,
that's true.
Mike Evans has the most receiving yards since 2015.
There you go.
How about that?
All right, Ted, let's close this out with our final segment of the episode. This is, just your overall sleepers. Now, the way that I sort of phrased it before was just that, depending on how many leagues that you're playing in, who is the guy that you're getting the most shares of? So it's like, this is a guy that you're targeting in every single draft. That's like, every single draft that you're in, you're trying to come away with this guy in particular. So it doesn't matter what type of league you're in. This is a guy that you're like, yes, he is going to be the centerpiece of my fantasy starting roster. So who's that type of guy for you?
Yeah, considering we're reviving the LAFB league, I don't love the fact that I'm sharing this publicly, but that's part of the job. This is a guy who I think he has all the classic traits of a sleeper, and that's Rome Odunze. I really like his promise going into next year. Now, I know what I've seen a lot on Bears Reddit, and I've heard.
You're high on the Bears for some reason. You got Rome Odunze this week. You had DeAndre Swift a couple weeks ago or a couple episodes ago.
I think the Bears are going to kill it this season. I think that it's going to be between them and the Lions for NFC North. I think the Packers are going to take a bit of a dip. I think Vikings are going to be competitive. I think Vikings are a wild card favorite, but I think it is a 2-horse race, 2-cat race, 2-animal race, 1 cat, 1 animal, whatever. Between the Bears and the Lions for the NFC North. I really believe that. First off, Keenan Allen's gone. And that is a huge target sucker away from Rome Odunze. I know what a lot of people are saying, on Bears Reddit, what I was saying before is that, Colson Loveland and Luther Burden, they're going to, that's really bad news for Odunze, which it very well could be. But here's the thing I think a lot of people are forgetting is that receiver is the hardest position, in my opinion, to adapt from, college to the pros. And I know what a lot of people are saying, well, Colson Loveland's a tight end. He's not a receiver. People get real. He's a receiver. He's a glorified he's a glorified receiver. Come on. So I think that that is a concern that might get kind of troublesome later on in the season, but by then you can figure shit out. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yep.
On top of it, I don't know if you've been seeing these reports, but I've been seeing some report. No one super reputable has been reporting this, but there are some reports that Ben Johnson is actually not that big of a fan of DJ Moore. And I'm kind of buying those reports though, because DJ Moore's play style, and this is the comparison I made, while I was taking my notes. I think here's how their offense is going to work. Odunze is going to be their Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Makes sense. Okay.
DJ Moore is going to be their Jameson Williams. Both were productive. It was just one was a little bit more, not even a little bit, was way more consistently productive. because Odunze is bigger. He has more of that skill set that's comparable to St. Brown, where DJ Moore tends to be a more stretch the field type of player. So I've been seeing people be like, oh, the Bears are going to trade DJ Moore. I'd be absolutely shell shocked if that happened. But I do think DJ Moore is going to be more of a boom or bust type receiver, and Odunze is going to be more of their go-to guy. And let's assume I'm wrong. Let's assume that Odunze is not that guy and he had a repeat of last year. He was still a pretty solid bench receiver last year. So this is where I combined why and where there. This is why it is where it is key to look at when you're drafting bench guys. Look at like, okay, when's my starters bye week? Because let's say Odunze is going to get up against, I don't know who has a shitty secondary. Not Seattle. Seattle's actually pretty solid. Arizona's secondary is very questionable. So if Odunze is playing Arizona week 5 and your starting receiver has a bye week 5, that's a great bench player to play, in my opinion. So worst case scenario, you get a great bench player. Best case scenario, you get a starting caliber wide receiver in, the 6th, 7th, 8th round, because if people draft like I do, where it's like, all right, let's look at their last season stats, they really weren't that impressive. So I think he will end up slipping way further than he should. So Rome Odunze is a guy I really, really like.
Yeah, I think you also look at the fact that he was a rookie last year. He's trying to adjust to the offense. You had Keenan Allen there, like you mentioned, DJ Moore. So you had a lot of other key pieces there that are sort of taking a lot of the targets.
He still had quite a few good games.
Yeah, he did have a lot of good games, but I think it came towards the end of the season, if I remember correctly. So I think you look now, he's probably going to be a primary option in that passing offense. I think I talked about it before too, where it's like, I know you mentioned receiver. It's one of those positions that has a hard time transitioning. I think tight end is also one of those positions that has a hard time adjusting as well to figuring out the blocking schemes and, running the right routes and just going up against different competition. So it's like, I think Colston Loveland may find a little bit of a struggle early in the season possibly. But yeah, I mean, it could be wrong. Could be a Brock Bowers situation. We'll see exactly how it pans out there. But yeah, I think because he's going to be a primary option in this passing offense now, I like him to be more of a trustworthy option compared to DJ Moore. I think exactly like you laid out. I think
that built-in chemistry with Caleb Williams is a huge factor that's going to like put him above guys like Burton or guys like Loveland. And don't forget, by the way, Loveland's going to be buried behind Cole Kmet.
That is true.
That's why that was such a weird pick to me.
It was a very interesting pick, yeah. But I also saw that they could get out of Kmet's contract in the offseason.
Chicago. Thank you for Tyler Ward. By the way, Dallas Clark did not give him permission to wear 44. I was shocked by that.
Is this number retired? Clark's number is retired, right?
Is not. I thought it was until I looked it up.
It's going to be retired, right?
Oh, I think 100% is going. Well, now that Jim Irsay is dead, maybe not, but we'll see. R.I.P. Not Dallas Clark, Jim Irsay.
Yes, Dallas Clark is still alive, people.
As far as we know. As far as we know.
But yes, as of news today, especially as of recording, unfortunately, Jim Irsay has passed away. So, but yeah, so I do think that it was interesting that they went with Colston Loveland, especially when they had Cole Kmet. That was a very interesting move, but maybe they envisioned him more to be, like I said, a more productive tight end position instead of being the blocker that Cole Kmet could possibly be there. So I don't know, maybe Ben Johnson just needs more playmakers, so that's why they took him there, number 10, so whatever it is there. But yeah, I do like Rome Odunze more than DJ Moore, but I wouldn't say that DJ Moore is going to be boom or bust, because, I mean, they did extend him. They extended him when they signed
fair, I didn't say that. I said he was going to be a solid bench option, which means it's not boom or bust.
You said he was boom or bust first, though.
Okay, well, I retract that statement. He's worst case scenario, he is a solid bench option.
Okay, that's fair. But
some would consider a bust, but
but yeah, as far as a mid-round guy, this is where you want to target some of those potential breakout guys. And yeah, I think Rome Odunze fits that bill for sure there. I'm going with a guy because there's a transition at the offense with one of these NFC West teams that I think is very interesting to see what their offense is going to look like this year. And no, I'm not talking about San Francisco, because yes, they are going through a bit of a transition as well. But no, I'm talking about.
Wait, let me guess. Jackson Smith-Njigba. I butchered that last name, but whatever.
You did, but I don't think he's gonna. I think he's gonna get drafted a lot higher. So he wouldn't be a mid-round magician.
Damn.
It is the right team though. You are right with Seattle. I'm going to the running back position though. I'm going with Kenneth Walker III as my guy that I'm sort of drafting in a lot of leagues this year.
You think he'll slip?
Well, I don't think he's going to slip, but like I said, the whole purpose of this segment is that who are guys that want a lot of shares of. So it's like, maybe he'll go obviously a lot earlier than the 5th round. Same thing with Jackson Smith and Jigba. But I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba is another guy that I want to get a lot of shares of, but I think I'm leaning more towards Kenneth Walker III, hence why I made him my pick here, is because, like I mentioned, this offense is going to a bit of transition. We talked about earlier, DK Metcalf traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Geno Smith traded to the Las Vegas Raiders, they released Tyler Lockett, who's now a member of the Tennessee Titans, they signed Sam Darnold to replace Geno Smith, so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out there. They signed Cooper Kupp to be the new receiver for them as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to take more of a lead role there, so it's like this offense is making a lot of changes there. So very similar to like we were talking about with Carolina, where it's like they got a lot of young pieces. How's everything going to gel together? Now you're adding a lot of different pieces. You got some veterans, you got some young guys, you got some rookies, you got a guy who had a very fantastic year last year in Sam Darnold. Can he replicate that now this year with the new team? So it's like that's going to be very interesting to play. So because of all of that, this makes me want to lean more on the running game. And so that's where I trust Kenneth Walker III to be a focal point of that offense while they figure out everything else as far as the passing game is concerned. Because you look at the season that he had last year, fortunately, he dealt with a lot of injuries. He had an oblique injury at the beginning of the season. He had calf injuries. He also had ankle injuries. So with all that, he missed 6 games last season. He still finished 12th among running backs in PPR leagues as far as fantasy points per game with 16.5. He's been a very productive running back in this league in the times that he's been healthy. The previous 2 seasons, he had no injury concerns whatsoever. You look at the new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak is coming on to coach the Seattle Seahawks offense here.
Is that Gary's son?
In 2021, he was the OC of the Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook was 5th in the NFL in rushing yards under his offensive tutelage there. So you like that optimism there. Now you look at last year. Okay, you're like, okay, 2021, that was a handful of years ago. What has he done for me lately? Look at last year with Alvin Kamara. He had a resurgent season, Tad. Alvin Kamara finished.
Now, Kamara was one of my worst. He was one of my worst fantasy strikeouts.
I think you had him as a bust, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, no, I did. I was like, Kamara's done. And then he dude, did he prove me wrong?
He finished 9th among running backs in PPR leagues, and that was thanks to Clint Kubiak and that offense. Now, okay, you could say that offense and the quarterbacks had a lot more issues as to why they leaned more on the running game. But once again, that plays into my defense here as to why I like Kenneth Walker III, because I don't know whether Sam Darnold can replicate what he did in Minnesota and now here in Seattle. Like, I mean, he can, but he could also go the absolute opposite way, and he's an absolute bust. And we see the Sam Darnold that we're so used to seeing when he was with the Jets and when he was with Carolina. And briefly when he was in San Francisco, he looked pretty good in San Francisco during preseason, but during the season, it was like, hit or miss there. So it's like, I don't know what Sam Darnold we're going to get. Is he going to be the same guy that saw in Minnesota? Is he going to be like a regression candidate? Is he going to be the same Sam Darnold we saw all of his NFL career? Like, I mean, I don't know what we're going to get with him. So because of that, like I said, I think they lean more in the running game. I like King Kubiak to sort of give the ball to Kenneth Walker III a lot more. As long as he stays healthy, I think, Tad, he's got a very good shot of finishing with his first career top 10 finish at the position of fantasy football.
Okay, a couple things. One, speaking of New Orleans Saints offense, RIP Derek Carr.
He's not dead, people. He just retired.
just take, well, might as well be.
We need to clarify. We talked about one person who has actually passed away, but the other people have not died. So
to be fair to Alro, he might as well be dead. So the second thing is that was a great joke. The second thing is here's my main concern is last year was his first year where Pete Carroll was not his head coach. And as I pointed out during draft season, why it was so easy to predict that Ashton Jeanty, now, of course, I'm nailing the name, but during draft season, I couldn't do it for the life of me. But the reason why it was so easy to predict that Jeanty was going to be a Raider is because Pete Carroll loves to run the ball. He finished in the top 10 in all but 2 years of his Seattle career. Last year was the first time that Kenneth Walker had, another offensive coordinator, another head coach, and I'm surprised by that stat you shared that he was, 12th overall with running backs because he finished with under 53 carries. The previous 2 years, he had 219 and 228. That is a massive drop off with only 3 less games, by the way. So that's hard for me to really believe that was just purely just injury related. It's almost 11 p.m. It is 11 p.m. my time, people. Cut me some slack. So that's my one concern is I'm not sure if that workload is going to trade off. Now, I'm not very familiar with Clint Kubiak's offense. The stats you shared, should they hold true, which I believe they are, yeah, that makes him a fascinating prospect. The only thing I'm trying to think of, his ADP is going to be one I'm going to be looking out for. And also, you cannot forget 2 keywords, Zach Charbonnet.
That's fair, but I think the same thing that you sort of painted a picture as far as like you look at the numbers that Kenneth Walker III had, it's like, maybe it wasn't just the injuries, just the production levels just weren't there. Zach Charbonnet started every single game for them, and he only finished with, I think, like 20 or fewer carries than Kenneth Walker III, but his numbers were a lot lower when it came to fantasy points as well as just his overall rushing statistics. So it's like, at first, when he was drafted there, I was like, this guy is going to be, he was buried behind Kenneth Walker III. It's such an interesting move that they made. But just, I'm not seeing that same level of production that we saw at UCLA here in Seattle for some reason. So it's like, I'm not worried about Zach Charbonnet at all.
Well, and it's funny we should bring up Kenneth Walker because I was having this discussion with Jason Davis because he was trying to pull off a trade for Charbonnet. And I was like, dude, I don't know. I think he'll get buried behind Kenneth Walker. And I actually found something pretty interesting. And this was a couple of weeks ago. Kenneth Walker is headed into the last year of his deal.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is interesting because I'm actually a big fan of players heading into a contract year because historically, if you look, they play a lot better because they want that money. Oh, especially when it comes to running backs, because
running back for sure too.
Like, that's going to be the only big contract they get, and then they're out of the league. So I will say that is actually something in your favor of. Yeah, I think Kenneth Walker was going to be on it this year. Now, of course, the biggest X factor of this entire thing is, as you point out, Sam Darnold is that risk and take off. And another interesting thing, of course, it's just training camp hype bullshit. But something I've read is that Jalen Milroe is really impressing. So I'm wondering if we get kind of like a, Dak Prescott type thing where it was like, oh shit, this mid-round guy, or Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's probably the better example of like, oh shit, this mid-round guy's all of a sudden our starter. And like, shit, because people forget. Do you remember who Russell Wilson was behind when during his rookie year in the preseason?
Of course I do. Matt Flynn,
you are correct. And it's a very similar thing, right? It's like, It's a very similar situation. I'm like, all right, this vet had one good year, even though Matt Flynn didn't even have a good year. He had like 2 good games. But actually, I think he only had 1 good game. But bottom line being is like, I've been hearing very, very good things about Jalen Milroe, which is shocking, especially you, because you were kind of getting.
I'm still down on him. I'm not believing any of the hype. I'm like, this is just purely preseason.
Well, like I said, it's May talk if we need something to write about. So
exactly,
I'm not buying into it yet. But all I'm saying is that quarterback situation is going to have a huge influence on his production. But yeah, if he's there in the 3rd round, I would definitely consider him.
Yeah, I am not buying the hype on Jalen Milroe until he actually becomes an NFL starter and he actually can produce as an NFL starter. Like I said, I just don't see it. I don't know why so many people are so high on this guy. I really just don't. See it.
This is funny because like Jalen
How
Milroe,
I feel about Kyle McCord is the absolute antithesis of what I feel about Jalen Milroe. That is
I was gonna say this reminds me so much of last summer when I was like, guys, Quinn Ewers is terrible, and all of you guys were like, what are you talking about? He's not that bad. And then he almost went undrafted. I'm like, yes, I told you. Fuckers. Although I will say Miami as landing spot for him, perfect. Chef's kiss.
Actually, might find some playing time there with all the injuries to Tua. I thought that's going to be very interesting to watch.
That quarterback room is fascinating. Tua, Zach Wilson, and Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see for sure.
I kind of want Miami to get Hard Knocks again. Be way more interesting than the Joe Philbin season.
Oh, Joe Philbin.
I bet that for a throwback name, Joe Philbin. God, he was so boring.
All right, so that will close out today's episode. Like I said, some early talking points as far as your fantasy football drafts and fantasy football strategies there. But like I said, it's already close to the end of May. We're getting closer to the fantasy football season. So, yeah, we're definitely going to be ramping up all of our fantasy content. So, I mean, yeah, we'll be giving you, as mentioned, we'll give you our best picks or some of your sleeper picks, bust picks, guys that we think are absolutely going to kill it as far as make or break years. I mean, we're going to do our head coaching series as I sort of teased a little bit earlier there. So, I mean, yeah, guys, a lot is coming right down the pipe for you guys. Best way you can sort of keep in touch with all of these things that are happening with our podcast, whether in video or audio form, is make sure you're following us on our social media handles there. Got us on Twitter. You got me at Othercide23, Ted at TedSide94, got the show handle at The Aside Guys, and of course on Instagram at The Aside Guys as well. So yeah, that is where you can find all of our future position rankings where we drop them. We'll be dropping our graphics for boomer bust players, for sleepers, for busts. I mean, just you name it, we'll be dropping graphics for it. So that's the only way you can find all those graphics is on our social media handles. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, or you're always up to date with our podcast, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you're always up to date with our YouTube videos as well. And please, guys, make sure you're supporting our parent network at LAFB Network, because without them, there would be no us. I mean, they're giving you a lot of great content when it comes to the Rams and the Chargers and all of their off-season plans as far as like training camp and, you know, how crazy that Minecraft video was for the Chargers. And, you know, they're giving you a lot of great content when it comes to those two teams at the NFL level. And, of course, with the NFL season approaching upon us, the college football season will be coming before that. So, I mean, guys, we are less than 100 days away from the college football season. So, LAFB coverage got you covered with your Bruins and Trojans coverage as well. They're all 4 LA sports football teams there. But, Dad, it's not just football anymore, because they're giving you a lot of great coverage, especially with the NBA draft happening next month. You can talk about it being rigged or not, but you got your coverage there.
I ain't complaining, but it was rigged.
But you got your coverage there with the Lakers and the Clippers. As far as NBA
do I have to
coverage
become
is there.
a Bulls fan now? Is that how that works?
Why?
Well, because I'm living in Chicago.
Yeah, you have 40 favorite teams with every sport, though. So, I mean, that's just who you are.
Yeah, but the Bulls suck.
Yeah, they do. But you like other teams that suck too, like the
Lonzo Ball's still a Bull. Oh, how dare you! That
was
a low blow. But yeah,
why is it a low blow? Did you see their game 4? It was absolutely terrible.
I know, trust me. Yeah, me and my bottle of Jack definitely saw that game.
Oh my gosh! So they got you covered with your Clippers and Lakers offseason coverage, and of course the MLB season in full swing here. They got your Angels and Dodgers coverage as well, guys. So all the big 3 sports, they got your coverage there for it. But guys, to everybody who's already supporting our podcast by listening to the podcast, watching our videos, interacting with us on social media, dropping YouTube comments, I mean, just anywhere and everywhere that you're supporting the podcast, we really cannot thank you enough.
And as Amir pointed out, we have awesome Trojan coverage. It starts with Amir's very good friend, Al Rowe, with the Salute to Troy podcast. Sure. He does everything, you know, at the best, whether it's recruiting news, spring training news, you know, summer camp news with the USC football team. So if you want any of those updates, be sure to check that out. If you want to hear about all the new movies and also want to know a lot about football, be sure to check out LA Confidential. In fact, Chauncey, I know you're listening to this. Text us, let us know what you thought of Sinners, because I just watched that last night. So good. Amazing. Do you even know what I'm talking about?
Well, of course I do. Okay. You already talked about it before. I was on that episode where you talked about it.
Damn it.
He didn't go into details about it, but yeah, you talked about it. He said it was amazing.
You need to watch it. Michael B. Jordan is like a treasure. We need to protect that man at all costs. But LA Confidential is where you can find out all of Chauncey's takes on movies, Rams, and just football in general. Like, he talks everything. It's so much fun.
Well, it's all LA sports. He talks about Dodgers. He talks about the Lakers as well. So Kings a little bit.
Being on his show is so much fun. Listening to his show is so much fun. So be sure to check that out. If you're going to the LAFB network site and you're like, oh, it's not there, that's okay. We're just doing a little bit of reconstruction. We're figuring it out. But you can definitely find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the LAFB Network YouTube channel, all 3 of those. And wherever else you find your podcast, we are there. So be sure to click subscribe. And if you can, leave us a review. If it's good, if it's bad, just keep it to yourself, please. Otherwise, as always, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe, everyone.